What's up guys, Zach from Our Customs, and today I'm going to be showing you how to identify a Mercury crank without having the block. So one of the most common upgrades is getting a 4-inch stroke out of a Mercury crank. New old stock, otherwise known as NOS, is really popular right now, but it's hard to walk up on an old crank, old flathead parts, and not know if they're a desirable part or if it's just another original flathead part. And today I'm about to show you the difference. So in the flathead world, there's a lot of hearsay on what's what or how to identify things. If you're new to the flathead world, one thing you need to know is Henry Ford, when he was making this stuff, he was trying to make a quality product. So if you tried something today and didn't like it tomorrow it's different. So that puts you in a situation where I can put out some information about something, but then there's like 15, oh by the ways, this is different, oh by the way, this is different. So I'm going to give you two for sure ways to identify a Mercury crank, and a couple of ways that most Mercury cranks had this set up, some of them didn't, so it's not as hard or solid fact. Alright, so step into my Corona-free office here and I'm going to show you a couple differences. So the first thing you need to do is measure the stroke. How can you measure the stroke if it's not on the engine? I'm about to show you. You need to put it on some kind of platform so it's rotating on the axis of the front and rear main right here. What I've got set up is just some wood blocks so the weights aren't going to hit my table. And I have the main caps flipped upside down bolted to this wood here so I can spin it pretty easily. Alright, so when measuring it, here's where you can make a couple mistakes. We're going to spin this to make sure whatever journal you choose is the bottommost center that it can be. Get your nice little right angle measurement right here. Okay, I'm going to loosen it up. Make sure it's flat on the table or whatever surface you're measuring it from. And I'm going to push it up to where it feels like it's this lowest point of the crank. I'm going to tighten it down like it's a dial caliper. I'm going to pull this out and write down whatever measurement I have here on the stick. Now what we're going to be doing is doing the math between whatever measurement we get at the bottom and whatever measurement we get at the top. Subtract it, and the difference is our stroke. So be mindful. I measured the bottom of the journal. So now when I spin it at what we call top dead center, I still need to measure the bottom of the journal. So I've written down my first measurement. I'm going to loosen this up, slide it up, make sure you're measuring the bottom, not the top. Make sure it's all flat and square. Make sure it's at the most top dead center. So I wasn't there, so spinning it is what helps me. Right around there. Try to tighten it up. Pull it out. There's the difference. So now I'm going to write it down over here. Do the math. So what I come up with, 3.75 inch of a stroke. So that's telling me this is a Ford crank, it is not a Mercury crank. If the difference is 4, then boom, there it is, Mercury crank, 4-inch stroke. So obviously I'm talking about the die-hard desirable 4-inch crank. Mercury did make cranks before the 4-inch, but this is the one that most people look for. To my knowledge, Mercury crank, the 4-inch was from 49 to 53, and I think 54 in Canada. There might be onesies and twosies outside of the United States for 4-inch, but to my knowledge, that's what I know about the US cranks. Those are the Mercury engines that had the crank that was actually 4 inches. Alright, so another way of identifying a Merc crank is measuring the thick throws. There's one here, and there's one here. There's two of them to measure from. So what you need to do is get a tape measure and run it across between the edge where it rounds off on both sides. And if you get 5.5 inches, which I have now, that is a Ford crank. Alright, so now I'm going to show you one more time and explain the difference, the Mercury. So you measure it edge to edge. You can see here it's 5.5 inches. But if it was 6, the Mercury cranks are 6 inches. So those are the two for sure ways to identify a Merc crank. Let's go into a couple that'll help you identify a little bit easier. If you see it, boom, that's the one. But if you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not a Mercury crank. So on a lot of the Merc cranks, the thick throw here, the one that's thicker than all the other ones, this one and this one, Mercury actually embossed some lettering right here. Some but not all have EAC written right here, 1cm or 0cm. To my knowledge, that's what Mercury used to identify their cranks, not on all of them, but on some of them. So another way to determine if it's a Mercury crank, but not an absolute determination, is the oil passage cleanout plugs right here. This is an earlier crank, so it doesn't have them, but the later cranks do. But the difference here is that the Ford crank's cleanout passage plug right here was a 3/8, and the Mercury's passage cleanout plug was a 5/8. Now there's a couple Canadian ones I believe that are a little bit different, but it's another identifier between the two. So these are just a few ways to identify a bird crank for all y'all trying to fish around in these old garage and shops trying to find some new old stock, all that good stuff. These are what you need to look out for. The stroke is the biggest one you need to look out for, and that's a fine way to identify the stroke without actually having the block itself. If this was helpful, or if you have any comments, please leave them down in the comments section. Let me know. If you have any questions, feel free to ask away. Check me out on Instagram and Facebook, both at Wired Customs LLC. Thank you for watching.